Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day it may be in whatever part of the world you may be in. This is Dr. Todd with a full and complete Light Point podcast. I'm really excited because I have someone special to the right of me right now who's in the trenches with us as we figure out this whole podcast thing. I'm going to let him introduce himself. I'm going to get right into it. Real leaders, real talk, real time. With that being said, Parker, hello.
Yes, sir, Dr. Don. Well, it's good to be here. Thank you for having me. So my name is Parker Smith. I'm an entrepreneur based here in Atlanta. I have my securities license. I'm a fully licensed financial advisor, and that's what I tell people with my day job. But how Dr. Don and I got to know each other was through an organization that I run that I call a professional development organization called BC Professionals. I've been running that organization for about a year now. We meet twice a year with sort of a private roundtable approach, and then Dr. Don is actually sort of the catalyst for me right now with pushing out some events that I'm working on. So I'm sure we'll kind of get into that, but that's sort of my 30,000 foot view, and I'm sure we'll dive down from there.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, I'm really excited about the work that Parker, his team is doing around Peachtree Professionals. Any platform that you can create for people to, as business leaders or aspiring business leaders or transitioning business leaders, to come in and be able to examine best practices, to learn, to share, to discover, and in many cases just be vulnerable around, hey, this is my life as an owner operator, or this is my life as an entrepreneur. These are the things that I'm navigating, and to have a platform where they can really have a greater opportunity to not only sustain their business, but excel or thrive in their business, I think is awesome. So thank you for doing the work that you're doing. Thank you for inviting me as part of that process.
Yes, sir.
With that being said, one of the things that I think about in the context of aspiring businesses, I forget what the specific stat is. It's like 70 to 75% failure rate of small businesses in the first 5 years. I've even heard as much as 80%.
Yeah.
What do you believe to be the greatest factors that contributes to small business failure, and how does that influence the work that you do with Peachtree Professionals?
Well, to take it, you were kind of touching at the beginning of the show how the world around us can very much influence the world we live in. And I think a lot of times with small business owners, I talk a lot of like the psychology of business. And you have your kind of left brain people, your right brain people. You have your idea people, you have your solution people. And a lot of times, 95% of the time, those people, nobody is both. Nobody is the idea and the solution. And with a lot of small businesses, I will see a lot of people who have a great idea, no solution. I see some people that have a great solution, but what is it actually solving? It may be an ethereal solution, but they have no true idea to implement it with. And so I see a lot of times, I'm a huge proponent of collaboration over competition. And when you put two people in a room together, they can one can come out bloody, even on the other side, fought with the other person until they were the only person left, or you can have two people that come out as a unit. And I think a lot of times in business, people are unwilling to give up any sort of control. They're unwilling to say, well, this is my idea and you may have the solution, but I'm not willing to take that because then it feels like it's less of my idea, or maybe it feels like it's less of your solution. And I think with small business owners, you have to realize that you hear the one-man army. There are no true one-man armies. There may be, one person who is driving all of the influence, driving all of the generation, all of the business, but they typically can't do that alone. Like I just use my business as an example. Like I am the one out seeing the people, but I have people in my back office that do just as much valuable work as I do. And so you have to realize that you can't do it all alone. And I think a lot of small business owners, especially your solo entrepreneurs that are like, oh, this is me, I'm doing it, I build everything, I do everything from A to Z. I think that creates just an uninhabitable situation for those business owners. And I think it's hard to get over that hurdle, but I think approaching life through collaboration rather than competition is a great start for those people, but there's a lot of great ideas in the world, and they can't all work.
I love that. The premise of approaching life through collaboration and not competition. I'm a firm believer in that. And I've grown in my understanding, to your point, as an entrepreneur. I had an entrepreneurial spirit since a very young age. I can give many stories around my first couple of startups, but I'll go into when I truly engaged more formally in this entrepreneurial journey as a business owner. And my first company was Delano Business Solutions. That was the name of it. Delano is my middle name. It's my father's first name. I always envisioned having this business, Delano Business Solutions. I knew I wanted to help at the time the small business community. I knew I wanted to serve as an advisor because I had come from these big box consulting firms, but I would get calls from small business owner operators saying, I need help. But they needed a similar context to how we were helping organizations shape business structure, infrastructure, process, systems, people, but through a much smaller, more narrow lens, lower price point, more streamlined, more simplified. And then it went from that to, hey, I just don't even know how to form an LLC, right?
Yeah.
But through that, to your point, I fell into the trap, like many of my clients at the time, in trying to do it alone.
Yeah.
I was kind of functioning like this sole practitioner, but I wanted all the elements of an established operation. And it wasn't until I started to make connections and started to recognize I was afforded a couple of opportunities where I became a co-supplier or a subcontractor to a contractor who acquired this large piece of business. Yeah. And I recognize that it's less about my name on the business, on the contract. It's more about impact that I am able to have and that my organization is able to also. Which brings me to, and then there's been a ripple effect. I tell you now, 4 businesses later, 2 sold, 2 dissolved. Our capacity to scale relationships, I would say network relationships, strategic partnerships. That's been the catalyst to our growth. That's been the catalyst to our sustainability. I'll say all that to say, what's the biggest barrier to, so you said people don't recognize the importance of collaboration over competition. What's the barrier? Now, as a human behaviorist, I will tell you that there are many things at a personal level that influences someone's mindset as it relates to their willingness or propensity to collaborate with others. But do you think there's some other factors that limit someone's capacity to collaborate?
I mean, I think that there are countless things, and it does come back most of the time to human behavior and just our perception of our own reality and what we deem. I want to go back to a word you used that I love is impact. We all want to have this impact. And when I work with clients, I work with a lot of individuals and a lot of business owners. And the first question I always ask is, if we could do one thing to make anything else we did worth it, what would that one thing be?
Love that question.
Because my psychological approach there is that I want to make an impact. I want them to feel the impact. I want them to see the impact. Because I may meet with an individual business owner and they may say that one thing is I just need help with staffing. That isn't, I don't do staffing, but I know people that do. I can help them get connected. I can help solve that problem. By showing that impact, they understand, okay, this kid wants to help. He wants to do whatever it takes to get to me where I want to get to. And I think a lot of times, to go back to your question of what is that barrier for people, is I think a lot of times they aren't really sure what impact they actually want to have. Ooh. They just know that they want to do something, because a lot of times, we'll go back to your 4-year-old son. He's living the best life. He's a 4-year-old. And he may tell you, Dad, I want to be a firefighter. I want to be a superhero. I want to be an NFL player. I want to be a singer. He has all of these dreams, as he should. He's a 4-year-old. But I will also see a very similar approach from 25-year-olds who say, I want to be a singer. I want to be a dancer. I want to be a movie star. Or it's like, okay, that was one thing when you were 4 years old. But now it's less of I want to be this ethereal thing. what impact do you want to make? And I think not enough people ask themselves that question first. Because similar to how I say I ask every client, what's that one thing I could do to make anything else we did worth it? As a business owner, you have to ask yourself the same thing. What is the one thing my business could do that I could look back on 40 years and say, that was worth it? And I think not enough people start with, Simon Sinek, who I'm sure you're familiar with, has the famous saying of start with why. And I just think a majority of people do not start with why. They start with how, and they may not know how to do it, and so they get stuck. Last thing I'm going to say is you were mentioning, you have this guy, he's got this great idea, but he doesn't know how to form his LLC. And you make, good, but like, oh, so what are you trying to do? Oh, well, I'm following Amazon, they bought all these warehouses all over the place. They have this like drop shipping, strategy. I think I'm going to employ that as well. Okay, that's awesome. So let me just see your LLC paperwork. Oh, I don't have an LLC. Why? I don't know how to do it. I'm still figuring that out, but I just need to get these warehouses, and I need to hire a couple thousand people.
Yeah.
You want to talk about putting the cart before the horse. There's no horse. All you have is this cart that you cannot pull around yourself.
Yeah. A great analogy. In fact, you just described 2015 to 2018, about right, somewhere around there. In that's what I would encounter day in and day out.
Yeah.
I have this vision. I got business cards. And it's like, yeah. You need a lot more, right? We're going to realize this vision. But that brings me to this balance between connecting with your why and what that means in reality in terms of sacrifice, commitment, investment to realize that why. Because, for example, as much as I dreamed of Delano Solutions on the side of the building, the closer I got to connecting with my why and understanding where the greatest power of my influence and impact, which wouldn't happen for another 7 years, by the way, the more I recognize that Delano Business Solutions would not be the catalyst to it.
Yeah.
Right? It was 2 companies later before I recognized the greatest platform by which I can have the greatest impact would be X, or would be Y, not X.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work in self, humility and reflection and healing, and right, that a lot went into getting connected with your why, because it may mean going down a path that you didn't envision for yourself. It may mean your why from an impact context is not the same as your why from a desire.
Yeah. No, I think, you mentioned business owners being able to connect to their why. And, this kind of started off with a conversation around barriers and what is the barrier. And I'll bring it back to, I think a majority of business owners need to even take a look at what is their why. Because you mentioned earlier, I have a business card. Well, hey, what do? I solve problems. What kind of problems do you solve? Problems. I solve. Because if you're not intentional with your why, because it's very easy to be like, well, why are you doing something? Because I care about it. Because something happened to my family member that made me feel like I needed to do it. Whatever your like ethereal reason is. But if you're not intentional about that why, like it affected my family member, so I am going to make sure that people have X, Y, Z put in place so that what happened to me never happens to them. That's intentional. You have a set of things you are trying to accomplish, and that is what you want to pass on to other people. That is intentional, and yet that connects to your why. Because if a why without intention is basically just what? You aren't really doing anything with that. Because if you aren't, I think just being intentional with your why is definitely the most important part. And I think with a lot of business owners, the real separation is that kind of left brain, right brain. You have the person with the idea, but they don't have the solution. You have a person with a good solution, but no idea to implement it with. And I think that barrier for a lot of people is the same reason a lot of people pack it up and say, that wasn't the catalyst. But one thing I wanted to ask you, because you mentioned, with Delano Business Solutions, that business wasn't the catalyst. What was the catalyst?
Twofold. My first true formalized business partnership with CultureWorks. So I had Delano Business Solutions, then CultureWorks, then LightPoint. What was before Delano? OTS Holdings. I was an executive with OTS Holdings. That was my first opportunity to learn what it meant to be an executive in a company. That was my first VP. That was it wasn't my first director role, it was my first VP role, sales and operations. And then in the midst of serving in that capacity, I was brought in to help launch a startup.
Okay.
And that was my first pathway into understanding what was required to launch a startup.
Yeah.
That was also this example of what it meant to see a partnership function and thrive, because the owners of OTS Holdings were a partnership. And they had 3 other subsidiary companies, and we started up the 4th. Then from there, I had this desire for partnership.
Yeah.
And it wasn't afforded to me. Now because they had other intent for the holdings company themselves.
Yeah.
No, I don't want any more partnership, which they did.
Yeah.
I struggled with that because I wanted to have impact and purpose, and we had just started up this other consultative practice together. I was the principal in that practice, by the way, and I struggled with that, so my ego said, well, fine, I'm going to go off and start this dream I had.
Yeah, name on the wall.
So I would say the catalyst truly began in the journey before I ever knew what it was.
Yeah.
But Delano Solutions went through the trials and tribulations of that business, and we made money. I think we had some impact, but not to the level that I believe we could have had, because I wasn't where I needed to be at the time.
Yeah.
I was trying to piece what I thought I knew together into a business. I had no real clarity around what truly are you trying to solve.
Yeah.
So, in every stage of your life cycle, I have solutions in the small business. Huh?
Yeah.
What are you solving for, sir? I didn't know how to articulate that, nor did I understand that where I would apply was what made us special, what made us different, which was it had a lot more to do with me than any framework I put around the business. In the midst of creating that business or operating that business, technology is moving, of course. This use of app technology was growing. I started building an app that was designed to support the small business community. It's called My Biz Expert. And the idea was small business owners, oftentimes, they don't have the resources to dig in there that they can just pick up the phone and call and say, hey, I need help with these basic things.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to solve these huge problems and provide long extended scope of work solutions. Meanwhile, they're calling me, asking me, how do I form an LLC? And how do I, when's the right time to acquire my first, employee? They were asking nuanced, questions that may have been relevant. And I said, how do I create a pathway for them? So we wound up building this app that was basically real time. You could, as a subscriber, message an advisor and get real time answers. Depending on the complexity of it, you would have a response in 8 hours, 12 hours, 24 hours. This was at the time very ahead of time because there were no real small business resources that were centralized.
Yeah.
I have to go to the Small Business Administration. I have to Google my local government. I have to do this. I have to call this person. And it's all convoluted and confusing. I was trying to solve for that.
Yeah.
That was the next milestone or catalytic moment when I recognized I'm getting clearer about what I'm solving for. Now, ironically, that still wasn't in my future. See, that's the thing about catalysts is catalysts bring you, it's for me, the catalyst that brings you to the next thing that gets you closest to your why and your purpose and your real point of impact. Now, that's a great concept. Now, fast forward, we have AI, we have all these other things I can answer. I didn't need a call center with people responding to messaging about basic business problems. Now you can talk to Gemini, or you can talk to whoever and say, hey, and you'll get 48 different pathways to follow Ella. But at the time, it still seemed relevant. What I did not understand or recognize was me navigating building that software was only equipping me for the next partnership I would establish. It had nothing to do about what I was building. It just taught me how to build software. And at least it's foundational concept of what it's required to build a concept, wireframe it, go through the phases and all that, blah, 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 with a app development company. Fast forward, Delane Solutions was reaching for business. My future partners in Culture Works were growing. They had a whole second consulting firm. That consulting firm, Atlanta-based, growing and evolving, and they had this big project, and I'm just reaching for opportunities. So I contracted with them to support this big project.
Yeah.
And that's how I forged that relationship with the owners of this other consulting practice. Could I have ever imagined that they would become my business partners? Could I ever imagine that during that time I'm going down this journey around organizational behavior or workplace culture and all these other things and studying industrial organizational psychology, human behavior and all these things? Did I realize that it would turn into a culture of performance management? That it would lead to us establishing a methodology and building a company around cultural performance management? No, and by the way, we decided we wanted to build software. I mean, these things you can't even predict. I didn't realize that all these things were equipping me. So the next catalytic moment was my decision when I said, I don't care if Delane Solutions is on the name. They're outsourcing work to me in California. I'm taking it. Yeah. That was my first subcontractor engagement. I was under representation of another company serving that company's need. So again, catalytic moments that led to the next phase of me getting closer and closer. There, a couple of years later, we built this concept, or my partners had this concept around culture works, and I came in as the subject matter expert around organizational culture and behavior and blah, blah, blah. Then they decided, hey, you want to be the CEO of the company? Okay, let's do it. Yeah. So all these things have led, but through that was learning and stepping away enough to recognize the bigger picture and what it all meant. My first book published was with my partner, From Culture to Culture, where we articulated our methodology that we call cultural performance management. All these things were catalytic moments. And then even through that work, we recognized, well, that's where the biggest impact point was, where I said, organizational development standpoint, from a leadership development standpoint, where people responded greatest in my capacity to impact the organization was not about technology or software. It was about how I was able to influence leaders in their business and connecting with now what I call their life point. Yeah. So, but it took all of those transitions and roles and businesses to get to the point where I recognized we were generating more revenue through the consulting work that we were building through CultureWorks than the actual software. Yeah. I wasn't meant to be the CEO of a software company. And that was an epiphany I think all of us as owners realized. They had a whole thriving other consulting firm. They didn't want another consulting firm in this world of organizational leadership and industrial organizational psychology and org transformations. There's synergy in our work, but they didn't want to start a whole nother consulting firm. Yeah. So we were able to establish a strategy to sell the business. Well, it was acquired by their larger company, the technology side of it. And I was able to take this consultative thing that I didn't quite have a base for yet because it really wasn't designed to be. We were doing consulting work for the sake of software.
Yeah.
Instead of saying, but we recognize there's a demand here. There's a need over here that says, organizations need you to do this work regardless of the tool you're prepared to implement in their business. So I took that work and those clients that remained and we formed LifePoint Advisors to really lean into this, to the why, to the impact. That's a long way of sharing with you that it was not a linear journey, nor was it one moment. There were a series of moments. And I just summarized. I could have a subset of moments, or catalytic moments, I said. But the greatest impact point was when, in the leadership of Culture Works, and how we were actually, when our clients started telling us your impact was when that leader stood up at our last company event, or when that leader's wife stood up at that company event and said, the work you're doing has changed, has shifted my husband's life, my life, and my children's life. Oh shit. Nothing to do with software.
Yeah.
I've had people say, listen, I was depressed. When I've seen business owners having family dynamic challenges and that were creating so much uproar in the business and in their family lives, when they said, you've helped us connect with ourselves and understanding the nuances of what's driving this force in our families and in business and how it matriculates in our business. You helped us. I've had leaders sharing office walls who couldn't even communicate, and they were the key leaders of the organization. Like these are the things where I was like, wow, okay, now that's real. That for me was like, that's the end. I've always said, even before I was ever an entrepreneur, I want someone, just one person, standing up at my people and said, Dante had a true, real, tangible, genuine impact on my life. And because of that impact, there was a ripple effect.
Yeah.
That's it. So for me, those were the moments where I said, wow, I need to be doing more of that. In a sense, at it again. It was never about the entrepreneurial journey. It doesn't scare me to start up an organization. That stuff doesn't, as long as I can, because if you're doing close to what your purpose is, there's a way.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to have barriers in the ultimate delivery of what your purpose is. So anyway, I'm gonna get off my soapbox, but hopefully that answered your question.
Oh, very much so. And I have a couple things why I think that's so powerful. Because I think for a lot of business owners, they are really worried about making the wrong decision. And in my perception, I am a firm believer that there are no wrong decisions, but only pivots.
Amen.
And you have pivoted multiple times. And one reason I've always liked the name of your company is just the word LifePoint. Is we all, in theory, can have that proverbial light point in our mind. I'll use your funeral as an example. This is what I want out of life. When I am gone, this is what I want. And that is your light point. And you have to pivot to get there because if to bring back your 4-year-old son, they have this life point. I want to be this singer. I want to be this actor. I want to be this whatever. And he's going to take actions over the rest of his life to continue to go towards that. But there is no we're going to put him in the class for 4-year-olds to be singers. He's just going to get there. There's not going to be any pivots for him. I had to pivot, but he's not going to have to pivot. Because a part of life is being able to pivot. And I think that's why your why is so important, because if you don't understand your light point, your waypoint, where you are trying to get to, then when you start pivoting, it's more like going through that revolving door, where it's because Jeff Bezos makes a really interesting point about pivoting and decisions, that in life, a majority of your choices will be what are called two-way doors. You will have your one-way doors where you go through that door and there is no coming back. And those are scary as a business owner. But a majority of what it takes to get to that one-way door are thousands of two-way doors, where you go in, oh, no, that room's pretty scary. You go in, oh, that's closer to what I'm looking for, but it's still not quite there. You have to go through these two-way doors. And the frustrating thing about life is that those doors will never be labeled. There will never be, oh, this is a one-way door, man. If you go in here, there is no coming back.
That's right.
But you have to be able and comfortable enough to be able to pivot when things do get to that point. Or I'll bring it back to, your software conversation. You saw a problem, and this is a problem for problem solvers, is that a lot of times before we see the solution, we start solving. And it's so easy for people that are just inherent problem solvers to say, well, I don't know where this is going to go, but I see the problem. I'm going to try to find a solution. And this is back to the left brain, right brain conversation is, on the other, there may be someone out there that has the idea that will solve everything. They just don't know how to implement it. And this is where I come with the collaboration over competition, is that I think you have to be willing, while some people may feel like, and may be the smartest people in the room, you have to understand that everybody has something to offer. And it may not be to you. They may not have anything to offer you, but they have something to offer to somebody. And the moment as a business owner, you look at somebody without saying anything, without knowing anything, say, not the person for me. Because finance is a really interesting thing working in that world. Which is I do a good deal of consulting, but a majority of my life revolves in the financial world. And it's so interesting. And you'll see stuff like this in media where it's like, oh, the richest people never wear labels. Oh, you can never tell the richest person in the room. It's like, no, you can't tell what they're wearing because you've never seen that before. It's not that some of them are wearing Costco jeans, some of them are doing whatever, but typically the reason you can't tell who the most expensive person or the richest person in the room is because they're operating in a different stratosphere. But that's a little outside of the point. My point is that in finance, you can never judge a book on its cover. Like, I have met with people that dress like me or in more debt than you could ever imagine. And then I meet with people that, they look awful. They just, no sense of they're just not put together, but they have more money than they know what to do with. And life is a lot like that. And, this is one of the oldest adages. I'm sure you told your 4-year-old son, don't judge a book by its cover. And you can't. To an extent, you cannot judge a book by its cover, and you have to give everybody their opportunity for merit. Because there are going to be people in life that are a drag on your time, that are a waste of your time, but you have to give your chance the opportunity to make that decision yourself. Because if you preconceive, say, waste of my time, I don't know, you very easily, we met you came into a Peace to Professionals event, shook everyone's hand in the room, you commanded the room, and I very easily said, well, that's not the person I want. I want to command the room. I need to be the person leading the conversation. I could have said, that is another type A personality, that's too much, not worth my time. But instead, that was 7-8 months ago, and look at where we're at today. And that is only through just the action of giving others opportunity.
I love this transition, so I'm so glad you brought that up, Marcus. Thank you. Because that happens on all sides of the table. So to your point, my colleague and operations lead, Cassie, she seeks out opportunities as we're trying to grow and scale the business to network and build relationships, all those things that we've been talking about. So she identified your organization and this particular event, and she said, hey, Dr. Vaughn, you need to be here. We're signing up. She signs me up for this stuff. I go. I think that morning I was stuck in traffic. I'm running late. I'm just so over it. Just get there. She's already there. She's like, where are you? So I walk in, and to your point, we all have this propensity to want to prejudge a circumstance, the situation, the room. And I said to myself when I walked in, because mind you, I spent a lot of time in the small business community. We have indicators that we know, we think we know where someone is, how they're operating. And I'm already kind of annoyed. And I get in the room, and I'm like, oh my God, I was late. The dialogue was already happening. And I'm sitting there how do I leverage this moment. And my nature is to do what you experience, which is, okay, let me establish myself in the room for my impact and who I am and what I am, and maybe through this. But frankly, it took a mental, conscious thought of, I can either check out because I'm not in it fully, mentally, emotionally, I just wasn't there, or I can try to do something with this.
Yeah.
And I still approach it kind of prejudiced because I was like, okay, is this going to be something? And what are we, is this real? No, Dante. This is about forging relationship. Your client may not be around this thing. It's not for that. It's for relationship. And you don't know where these relationships will take you.
Yeah.
So, okay, hey, nice to meet you. Nice to meet you. Okay, blah, 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 blah. Now, I think we were having some dialogue. If I have something I want to contribute to the dialogue, I'm going to speak.
Yeah.
That's just my nature, to your point. The type A side of me. Yeah, blah, 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 blah. But then I see you across the table as the organizer of the event. I'm like, what are we doing here? To your point, it wasn't until we both, because it was mutual, we both made an attempt to connect and understand, who is this guy? Who is this guy? And really exchange and dialogue around, what are we doing? Why does it matter? So I'm grateful for your openness and willingness to not say, okay, this guy gotta go. And I'm reflective of the fact that it took an intentional moment of me checking myself.
Yeah.
For me to be open enough to receive the room and receive you as the leader of the room.
Well, the interesting thing about opportunity is that it's given to others, but created by yourself.
Love that.
And
you know what? Parker always has some good zingers. I don't know if y'all listen to all this stuff. I need to write a book. Okay.
But in reality, to bring us back to the very beginning of the conversation, and why do small businesses fail? Yeah. And it is typically because people expect to be given things and are not willing to take it. Yeah. And whatever you want to say, whatever your political or economical point of view is, we live in a capitalistic society where opportunity can be created. It is not fundamentally just there, but it can be created. But if you are not willing to create your own opportunity, there will be nothing to be given to you. And that's where I state there. Like, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to meet you if I hadn't taken the chance to start something like Be Street Professional. You would not have had the chance to command that room if you had not taken the opportunity to speak when you had the chance to. And I think that's where I feel for a lot of business owners, because I didn't initially start in the small, medium-sized, small, large companies, whatever you want to call it. Initially, I started out in financial management, helping people just understand their money, which very quickly turned into helping these business owners understand their business, because that's how they're making their money. Because a lot of business owners, like me, for example, I don't start at the beginning of the year with salary. I have no salary. I have no guaranteed pay other than, recurring revenue, which is an opportunity I had to go out and create. No doubt. And for a lot of business owners, that is the scariest part. That is the number one reason that they will stop. You bet. And, the ironic thing about small to medium-sized businesses is that I think the only reason that word small even exists is because 80% of them fail. The majority, once that small business gets off the ground, whether that's year 1 or year 10, which both are okay. But once that business gets off the ground, once you get to that 10, 25 employees, like you're operating a medium-sized business. But it's so hard to get off that ground, to pull that jet up. Because we'll use it like the shipping planes they use, these massive, massive Boeing jets that they need these 6 massive thrusters to get off a 200-300 yard runway. You have to realize, and this is an analogy for the collaboration, is that, first of all, you are the jet, but your community around you are those thrusters. And you yourself, no matter how good your idea is or how good your solution is, you will not be able to get off the ground on your own. You may be able to jump as high as you can, but you're going to come back down. You're going to need some level of proverbial thruster to keep you going. And I think a lot of times that has to be through opportunity. It has to be through relationship. You're not all of a sudden going to wake up in the middle of the night and go, I just need to work 3 times as much. That'll solve all my issues. Instead of working 8 hours a day, I need to work all 24. I'll take 5-minute naps once once an hour. I'll be fine. Like that's the way to succeed. But rather it's, no, I need somebody else that can do the stuff that I'm not good at, which is very similar to your story.
Yeah.
You were delaying those business solutions. We help. What do? We help. We solve problems. I don't know exactly what the problem is, but we solve it. Tell me you have one, I'll figure out a way to solve it for you. Which is a very easy thing to say as a small business owner, to be like, I just want to help you. Like I need clients and I need to be with you. Like I don't care what your problem is. Let's figure out a way to do it. You're going to pay me X dollars and I'm going to do my job and hopefully it all works out for us. Where for the business owner, what is this guy talking about? I didn't even know I had a problem before he sat down. All of a sudden he's telling me he's going to solve my problems and he can't name them. I can't name them. So what's the issue? But where your business path took you is, okay, I'm actually really good at solving organizational, cultural problems. This is what I'm really good at. Let me find people that can do the other stuff. Because what that in turn does is those other people start creating those same opportunities for you as well.
Exactly.
And I think it's such an easy plight as a business owner to be like, I do everything. I'm on a one-trick show because I don't have enough to afford to hire someone else.
Yeah.
You don't have the money to afford to buy someone else because you don't have someone else. Like that other person that maybe because we live in a free will society where you have the opportunity to create your own economic benefit. And if you're going to hire somebody that's a drag in your company, then you hire the wrong person.
That's right.
But the reason we bring people, the reason we collaborate is because there is an opportunity for growth for both of us. You may be the idea, I may be the solution, or vice versa. But neither of us, the idea won't stand on its own, the solution won't stand on its own, but they can stand together. And I think it's just so easy for business owners to, especially young ones, because I work a lot in the 18 to 25 year range, and it is so often that they aren't comfortable enough saying what they hate doing, and so they end up just doing it over and over and over again. And they aren't comfortable enough to say, well, this is what I'm really, really good at, so this is all I'm going to do. So they end up just doing the things they hate, doing the things they're not very good at, and they feel in this mode of like, well, I want that name on the side of the building. I want to be the partner. I want to be the X. I want to be the Y. I want to be the Z. But they're focusing it from the wrong approach because what they're really good at is this, and that's what they need to be doing.
Right.
So I think.
Love it, Parker. I love it. And, you bring up a couple of the topics that will be great for some future podcasts. So I mean, just in this notion of what comes to mind is how do we get out of our own way? And that's a whole rabbit hole of dialogue that we can get into this concept around getting out of our own way. Because oftentimes, even with the leaders that my team and I engage with, it's so much more about their own personal barriers that have translated to limitations in their business than just the business and, gaps in process or system or what have you. It starts at a deep self. And this getting out your own way is something that kept registering in my mind. Is how do we help people get out their own way? Don't answer that. I want to save that for our next podcast. Thank you so much for
Thanks for having me.
Thought-provoking dialogue. Thank you all for tuning in. This is just one of many podcasts. I'd love to have Parker back. I'm excited about our upcoming event next week.
Yeah, next week, next Tuesday the 17th.
Next Tuesday the 17th. Where can listeners go if they're curious, if they're in the local area, maybe you are in the local area and want to take a trip to Atlanta? Where can they go to learn more about our event?
Yeah, so peachtreeprofessionals.org. Beautiful website done by Olive Branding.
Shout out to Olive Branding.
Yeah, shout out to Olive Branding. She's done a phenomenal job on the website. Sign up for our newsletter. That'll make sure you're always in touch with all the newest information. We're really, really excited. I think it's really going to be amazing. It's going to be me, Dr. Don, and the business coach, Pharrell Middleton. who are all going to be speaking there. And then we're also going to have a few other opportunities for us education. But it's really going to be amazing, and we'd love to see you all out there. Thank you again for having me today.
Awesome. Thank you for tuning into the Daily Light Point podcast. I'm so used to recording Daily Light Points. Real leaders, real talk, real time.